So hi everyone, really pleased to be here today and to be interviewing a fantastic UK author, Tom Evans. So Tom, to start this hangout, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your writing career, and your latest book?
Oh, thank you for that. Well, my latest book's my 11th, would you believe?
Wow.
I'll tell you where my career started, because I think most authors end up being an author kind of by accident. You can't necessarily plan it. And I was on a plane going to a holiday in the Caribbean, and all of a sudden this idea for a book came in, and I started writing furiously while I was on the plane. And by the time I got to the other end, the first draft was finished, and I published it when I got back to the UK. It's called 100 Years of Ermintrude. It's an homage to 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I published it before Kindle as an ebook for a PDF, and people started downloading it and liking it, and it ended up with me walking around London in a bra for 26 miles with 15,000 women because it mentioned breast cancer, and then people started approaching me saying, "You've written a book, can you help me write a book?" And it kind of started from there. So it was, and at the time I was a bored IT consultant. I was thought, what was I going to do with the rest of my life? And before I knew it, I'd written a second book and a third book, and people started saying to me, "Can you help me write a book?" As I said, and I was quite creative at the time, so I could help you with the creative process. But a lot of people came to me that were stuck, and I had no tools to deal with the stuckness. So I went and trained did a bit of NLP and a bit of hypnotherapy and a bit of regression therapy, and I discovered mechanisms to unblock pretty much anyone. And in all cases of writer's block, there was an underlying life block behind it. And so deal with the life block, and like a set of dominoes, the writer's block would just disappear. So that's how I got into this. And before I knew it, I'd gone from bored IT consultant to this brand new career as an author and an author's helper. You know, it's fantastic.
It is fantastic. It definitely sounds fantastic. So if, let's say, an author approaches you and is stuck, what do you do to unblock the author? Do you look for the underlying issue?
Well, often there's two ways of doing it. Either you put such a big carrot in front of the author, it just blasts the block out of the way. So you say, look, getting this book out is going to change your career, it's going to open all these doors and this sort of stuff. Or sometimes they just don't have a big enough idea. So I was with a couple of authors this morning, and they've been wanting to write a book for 5 years, would you believe? And they just didn't have the idea formed that well. So I didn't need to do any unblocking. All I need to do was give them I use a lot of mind mapping and stuff like that. And I gave them the whole vision for their book, how it's going to open doors for their business, gave them the structure for the book. I said there were the two authors co-writing, said what each is going to do. I said to both of them, you're going to take Friday mornings off, and you've got this many Fridays, and you're going to do these chapters, you're going to do these chapters. And now they've got the vision, they're off and running. Okay. Now, where the unstuckness comes in when I've set someone up like that is that if I find sort of 2 or 3 Fridays in, they've been missing out. And what happens is people get creatively uncreative. So they get really creative about doing everything else but the creative task. Then you know that there's a fear lurking, and it manifests as procrastination. So then I'll dig a bit deeper and look at the blocks. Or occasionally some people come to me and they are stuck, and they generally want a bit of unblocking. But you can tell when people turn up. If they're late, then time is an issue. If they come and they've got lots of notes all over the place, then if they're externally cluttered, internally their mind will be cluttered too, if you know what I mean. So often you can tell the signs by body language and how people turn up and present themselves as to what the issues might be.
Right, that's true. I mean, we're interviewing lately Scott Birkin, who's a speaker on creativity, innovation, stuff like that, and he said that like authors' main problem from the authors he had encountered or aspiring writers was around laziness and procrastination, and a lot of people were asking questions, how do I get started, instead of actually getting started. Would you agree with him?
Yeah, I would. Actually, and as I say, it's amazing how creative we can be about being creative. And so, and often the getting started is a lot of people have false starts. So there's probably more half-written manuscripts on people's hard drives than there are written manuscripts and published. You know, by some factor, probably 100 to 1, if not 1,000 to 1. And so a lot of people that have got half-written books, it's because perhaps the idea wasn't strong enough already, and then you get to a certain point and you think, well, where's this going? You know, and so I always start with a structure. So even if, but I have enough creative freedom to let people wander around, but we have a structure we're going to write to. And so all my books have got like what you call a meta layer. So so for example, I had my recent book. I knew it was going to be I knew it was going to be 18 chapters, and the number 18 was important as well. So it meant that when I got to chapter 18, I knew I didn't have to write a 19th chapter. And when I got to 17, I had another chapter to go. And what I do is I make appointments with my chapters. So in my diary, when I've got an 18 chapter book, there will be 18 appointments in my calendar.
I see.
And I move clients around those appointments, and those appointments are sacred because nobody else is going to write my book. And when you do that, then actually it's great if people ring up and say, "Can I see you next Tuesday at a certain time?" I say, "Well, no, I'm busy. I'm writing a chapter of my book," and it gives you an opportunity to pre-market the fact that the book's coming out, and people ask what the book's about and that sort of stuff. So it's a really, really good discipline to do, to have appointments with your chapters. And what happens then is that the information that you need to write for that particular chapter has this uncanny way of just showing up. You know, so let's say I've got a chapter to write next Tuesday. I will find the information that the missing information that I need before next Tuesday. My brain will just notice it. There's a few neurological reasons why it does that, you know, because you're kind of tuning into what it is that you need to write, and so you get into that lovely zone on that particular day, and the chapter just flows. And of course, if you allow other things to come in that would disrupt that process, the book will never get written.
That is true. Yeah, I think a lot of authors are afraid to set themselves deadlines because it might they're afraid it might hurt their creativity or their freedom or stuff like that. Do you think deadlines are important for an author? Is that the case for all authors, or are some authors best left alone without time constraints?
Well, actually, time is one of my big things. I discovered when I got into this creative zone that the nature of time seemed to change. Mm-hmm. And I noticed after I'd written 3 books that I wrote them all in spring. So I'm very observant of when I'm using my time now. So one, I think a deadline is really useful. But what I do is I tend to research in autumn and write in spring, and that's a very nice pattern. And I also know that I'm very good in the morning. I'm more creative in the morning, so I make sort of 9 to 11 the time that I do writing, and then 11 till 3 when I see clients and stuff like that. And so being mindful of your time and when you're most productive is important. And would you believe it or not, also the moon phase affects our creativity as well. So tuning into the phase of the moon makes a huge difference, not only in writing the book, but also in marketing the book and launching it and this sort of stuff. So and if you think about the moon, it affects the water on the planet, doesn't it? It affects the tides. Guess what we're made of? Mostly water. So it's no coincidence that it has an effect on us too. And that phrase about the lunatics coming out of the asylum, the police put they put a bigger force out on full moons because they know people get a bit more crazy. So it's all about directing these energies and stuff like that and being mindful of it. So time is important. Structuring your time around your favorite seasons, around the time of day, times of the month, and that kind of thing can have a huge effect on your creativity. But also getting into what I call the eyes open meditative state before you start writing has the effect of stretching time out, and also setting up what I call an interruption barrier. So when you're focused in the zone, what happens is thought forms don't leak out from your head and get picked up by other people that might call you and interrupt you. And very often my phone won't ring until I stop writing, you know, because I'm so intent on the writing that that I'm not kind of my mind isn't wandering elsewhere and perhaps influencing other people's minds, because we're all connected in a collective, which I've discovered as a scientist. I've discovered lots of things about how we really work and where our inspiration really comes from.
I see. No, that's fascinating. And there's also a lot of, you mentioned book marketing, and that's one of the other big things with along with the writing process that a lot of authors are afraid about or don't know how to handle. And I think you need a lot of creativity when it comes to book marketing, on top of a lot of time constraints and deadlines and organization. So do you help authors with that side of things as well?
Yeah, more and more, and I think there's two forms of block. There's writer's block and there's author's block. So
Mm.
writer's block is the block that stops writers getting the book written. Author's block is the block that stops them getting the book out there. And often a lot of writers that might be a bit shy, they might be frightened of public speaking, and this sort of stuff. And I suffered from that. You know, I found that my marketing strategy was to write another book and then another book and then another book. And I look back at 10 books later and thought, oh, hang on, I need to really think about selling these books now. And so with this latest book, I really am focused on the marketing. But you know, the best thing ever when you have a number of books out there. I think nowadays it's accepted that you need at least 3 books out there in a series to give you some momentum. The best thing is when you go to Amazon, it says people that bought this book also, and you see your name up a couple of times, which is just fantastic. Or Amazon keeps sending me emails saying you must buy this book by this guy called Tom Evans, you know, which is a crazy. So I think they've got Tom Evans, the reader, as a profile, and Tom Evans, the author. They haven't mapped the 2 people together. But you're absolutely right that we have this thing called author's block, and you know, because many people are shy and they work in their garrets and don't get out and this sort of stuff. But nowadays with the internet, we can do things like this with the Hangout. If you're really worried about your face being shown, then podcasts. I run a podcast called The Zone Show, and I find it a lot easier to interview people without video, mainly because the editing's a bit easier and this sort of stuff, and also lower bandwidth for downloads and that sort of thing. And some people like a podcast. But and so there's loads of ways of getting out there. There's loads of ways of being creative about getting your work out there as well. And one of the things I love doing is actually serializing bits of my book in audio, and helps you, you know, people get to hear your voice and that sort of stuff. And you know, you can put those out on podcast channels, you can tweet them, you can Facebook them, and this sort of stuff. And so I think it's about nowadays we have to be creative about producing the body of work, but also creative about getting the work out there.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, serializing audio bits, because there's a lot of talk on serialization through Amazon Unlimited, especially, and there's a lot of talk about audiobooks, but combining both is actually an interesting approach. But you narrate those yourself, right?
I do, yeah. And one of the reasons for that is that I write very hypnotically. So so I write in trance, and then my words entrance the reader. And I teach how to do that as well. So how you can get readers to make your book unputdownable. But also, one of the things I do is I record a lot of meditations that go along with the books. And I'm looking at the new Kindle textbooks at the moment that allow you to do text, video, and audio together. So at the moment, if you buy one of my books, you have to go to my website to get the meditations that go with it. But I'm quite interested in fusing the whole lot together into one body. And the reason I narrate my own books is because of where the intonations are and where the breathing is and this sort of stuff, and the depth of my voice. Where my voice is coming from in my body affects how the words will be perceived.
I see. And you also use meditation a lot to like to avoid writer's doubt and writer's block, and to slow time also, right? So how can authors use meditation in order to get past all the things that are an obstacle to their writing?
Well, I think the first thing to say, there's no mystique about meditation. So it's not about, you don't have to sit in a darkened room or in a cave with your legs crossed, chanting Om. It's a natural thing that we all do. When we fall into our creative zone, we are in the meditative state. But the thing that we should make a note of with our mind is our mind's only capable of having one thought at a time. The normal human mind can only think about one thing at a time. So if you think about what you're thinking about right now, the thought you were thinking gets replaced by the thought you're thinking about that thought, if that's not too confusing.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about, I can't write these words because people might not like them, or what am I having for supper, then that takes my attention away from the words that I'm writing. So getting into the meditative state with your eyes open is a fantastic way to get completely focused and absorbed by what you're doing, and to take your conscious mind out of the loop. So you become more a channeler of the work as opposed to a generator. So there's always like the work comes through you. And lots of artists talk about that you know, whether you're an artist or a musician, composer, or a writer, that it feels like the words come through you. And actually, very often I had to read my own books to work out what I've written, because I was in such a trance state when I wrote it. I wasn't aware of it. People go and quote words, phrases out of my books at me. That was brilliant, and I didn't realize I wrote it. But yeah, and so the way to get into the eyes open meditative state is just to learn how to meditate with your eyes closed first, and then to get into that state. And I've recorded a few visualizations that are free that teach that to all. I want also everyone to chill out as much as possible. And as you rightly say, when you get into that state, time seems to take on this lovely ethereal quality, and you get more things done in less time. And if you think about it, the normal human mind is probably about 33% efficient, because you might be focusing on what you're doing right now, but also thinking about what you're doing later on in the day, or maybe running a conversation from yesterday in your head. So our mind can be a bit of a jumble, and meditation is the key to unlock our mind to control what they call the monkey mind, and get your mind under kind of control.
And that's how in fiction you can maybe let the story carry you instead of carrying the story yourself, right?
Exactly. Yeah, my first book, 100 Years of Elementary, I had the idea for the book, but I didn't know the words, and the words just came. I have no idea to this day where the words came from. People call it channeling, and I kind of teach channeling, but I don't give it any sort of religious or spiritual kind of connotation. It's just it's a form of expression in my book. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I heard, like, I remember Rachel Abbott saying on a panel that she was, when reading her book, she was very proud of how her characters behave. And I found that very funny. And I can see now how she achieves that by being so immersed in the story that the story does things and her characters do things that she didn't expect.
Yeah, it's almost like the book gets read to you.
Yeah.
One of the tricks that I teach authors to do, and it doesn't matter if this is real or imagination, but I get people to channel the future versions of themselves that knows the words they haven't written yet. So when your book is published, let's say I'm writing a new book now that's going to be published in 6 months' time. There's a version of Tom in the future that knows every single word that I've written, and so I tune into that version of me, and it's almost like the words get sent back from the future to the present.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a kind of imaginative trick, but it really works. It's amazing.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And so how do you work with authors in general? You work across a wide variety of areas, from what I've understood right now. So how many authors do you work with at a time, for example?
I've probably work with no more than about 4 authors at a time. I've just got 2 clients at the moment. One client who's just published a 20,000 word book that she wrote in less than a week, and published it from first word to Kindle published in 5 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've taught her all my techniques of time bending and time stretching and getting into that state, and so she's written a lovely book in next to no time at all. And so yeah, so the way I work with authors is I tend to work a couple of ways. Sometimes I just do a session with her. I can work over Skype or face to face, where we map out like a book discovery session. And then the next thing I know, maybe 3 or 9 months later, a book's arrived through the post, and they just got on with and done it. Some authors I mentor all the way through the process, and I've also got a self-study course that people can follow if they just want to go and sort of do it under their own steam. That goes through all the principles, how you get into this lovely meditative state where the words just flow, and how you define the structure for your book and that kind of stuff. And so a couple of ways. So either face-to-face, mentored all the way through the process, or kick someone off and then the book arrives whenever, or self-study. So I'm pretty agnostic about how I work with people. And I tend to work a lot in the mind, body, spirit space and personal development space. But the book I've just published is about real estate, for example. The lady I just helped publish books about real estate. Just been with a couple of people this morning that are writing a book about the concept of conference centres as people palace, the place where even though we're going all virtual nowadays, how physical spaces are really important. So it's kind of architecture and functional, this sort of stuff. So, and I like the variety. I like working with different people. And to me, it's not about the book, but about the transformation in the author. So I love seeing a person that had the desire to write a book, then write the book, and then the doors that opens for them and their business as a result of getting the book out there. So I kind of work author-centrically, really.
I see. I have a last question on outlining and this like discovery map that you mentioned, and these chapters that you fix yourself. Doesn't like that impose constraints on your story, on your characters, and go against the idea that the story is gonna develop by itself?
Well, I think there's two approaches. There's an approach to non-fiction where a structure does really help.
Okay.
And so when you've got a non-fiction book, then it helps to have a structure, because you know you're going to. And a lot of people are doing it for their business, so they want to get it done in a certain amount of time. They might have a new workshop series coming up, or an event coming up where they want a book and that sort of stuff. So, but for fiction, I think you still need some kind of structure. And you might need a structure which is temporal, so you might need a chronology you're going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
You might need a structure which is events, so this event happened, that event happened. Or you might need the structure of, this is the development that happened to this character. You know what I mean? So you have maybe one or two themes that you want to explore. And let's say we've got a character that's going to go, that classic thing, somebody goes through a journey of trial to find enlightenment, if you know what I mean. Yep. Then we hold a meta level that we're going to find, then we throw things at that character that will then challenge the character to find their way, if you know what I mean. And also I love it's a guilty pleasure is Dan Brown, so when you read a Dan Brown book, at the end of it you might be slightly dissatisfied, thinking, oh well, but he is fantastic at holding your interest, because he always has like the A character, the B character, and then the albino monk, if you know what I mean. So, the hero A, then the heroine B, and then you go to the albino monk, and then at some point the hero and the heroine are going to get together, and the albino monk's going to come in. And I love the way he interweaves the threads in a quite a formulaic way, but it works. And so having that kind of meta structure, I think, works. Obviously, you let things happen, and you let the creative flow coming in. But the reason to have a structure is so you finish. Otherwise, you end up. I just worked with somebody a couple of years ago, and they ended up writing 180,000 words. It's too much for one book. So now we split that down into 3 books, and now there's a trilogy coming out and this sort of stuff. So, and my next project actually is a novel I started well before I even wrote that book of poetry, 100 Years of Ermine. And that I know is going to be, I've written a lot of it, but I became a better writer at the end of it, so I need to go back and edit the beginning of it. And I know that's going to be 3 lots of 30,000 words, roughly, if you know what I mean. And so, but I don't know some of the events. I know a lot of the structure to it, but I know if I'll do one lot, and I'll do another lot and another lot, and I won't diversify from that. Otherwise, I'll never get anything out. And that means I can release one book in sort of 6-month intervals over a couple of years, and it gives me a framework to work to and a framework to market to, and hopefully the reader, which is the main thing, a journey to go on to.
Exactly. I think that's a perfect note to finish this interview. The reader, which is one of the players in the publishing industry that often gets forgotten, I think, by a lot of the other players.
I start with the reader and their mindset. In fact, often I just have a couple of people's names in mind as well.
Right.
If this person can't read it, then this is my idea. I've got to understand their vocabulary, the words they understand, the phrases, the things that they like as well. And let's reader-centric and author-centric is my mantra, really.
I totally agree. That's also what we strive to create at Readsy, something more reader-centric for the publishing industry. Thank you very much, Tom, for this fabulous advice. I will transcribe this interview. I will put it out on the Readsy blog and provide all the links to your platform and to your books and to the different things that you mentioned in this interview, so that people can easily access those.
And just one note, any authors out there, you must get yourself a Readsy profile. They're absolutely Thank you. Great platform.
Thank you very much, Tom. Have a great day.
Take care now. Bye.